So first of all, when you start in PHP, you want to open the PHP with a less than sign, question mark, and PHP. When you want to close it, use a question mark and a greater than sign, although if you have a file that contains solely PHP, then you don't actually need to close the PHP again. But so we know that none of the files have been chopped off by accident, I'm just going to add a comment with end of file. Okay, so first of all, let's look at comments. To do a single line comment that ends when you press enter or go on to the next line, we can use the 2 forward slashes like so. So we can have this is a comment, then we go on to the next line and we have this is not a comment because we've got a new line. If we want a comment that spans multiple lines like we see here at the end with the end of file comment, we can use the forward slash, asterisk and then forward slash again, and then anything inside of this is now a comment, okay, regardless of what we have here inside of it. Okay, so that's comments in PHP, basics there. Let's look at variables. To define a variable, we use a $sign, the name of the variable, equals, and then what we're setting the variable to be. So we could make a variable called fruit, and then we could set the fruit to be apple. Now currently apple is a string. PHP is not a strictly typed, it's a dynamically typed language. So you don't have to say, okay, this variable is going to be a string, this variable is going to be an integer. You can just define it and then it's automatically set as that. Notice in this case we're using speech marks and we end the statement with a semicolon. That sort of signifies the end of a statement. So say you run a function, have a semicolon at the end. When we define a variable, put a semicolon at the end. Pretty much most things will do, apart from some statement, some repetition things like ifs and loops and stuff don't have them. Okay. So we can have fruit equals apple. Now, when we use speech marks, variable names inside of that string name, like we could have another var, and also special things that get turned into characters. For example, /n that gets turned into a new line character will be parsed inside of that string. So if you don't want it to be parsed, if you want it to be the literal value of that string, we use single quotation marks like so. And then even though we have our /n and another var there, those will just get typed out as that text, whereas if in the previous example we set another var to be 5, and then we use the echo function which displays things onto the screen, then and we go into our browser and we test this out, it would say apple 5 and then in this case the /n, sorry it should be \n. Okay, go back, test it, you see it's parsed into that character as opposed to just being taken as the literal value of what it is. Alright, so that's the string variable and the echo function. Let's look again at other types of variables. So you might have an integer which you just put in the number of what you want. Okay, there's no speech marks or single quotation marks around that. You can also have a boolean. A boolean is true or false. And when you do things like an if statement, you basically give it a condition and go, okay, is this condition, does it evaluate to true or to false? And then you make decisions based on that. So we can have boolean equals false, boolean equals true. Again, you don't have to put any kind of special marks around it, and we end the definition statement where we define the variable with a semicolon. Okay, that's booleans. Final variable type you'll come across on, I don't know, a reasonably common basis is arrays. It's not really a type of variable, but it is it's very commonly used, I suppose. Okay, so to define array, we have the array's name. In this case, we'll have test. It's the array's name. We then open the array with the array function here, and 2 round brackets. Notice we end with a semicolon. Now we place the items in the array inside of these brackets. So we could have an integer, a comma to separate items in the array, another integer, comma to again separate the items. We could have a string where it's parsed literally with apple in, again another comma to separate values, and pair. Now in PHP and most programming languages, arrays are indexed from 0, so this would be item 0, this would be item 1, item 2, item 3, yet there are 4 items, so it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 0, 1, 2, and 3. So that's the very, very basics of arrays. Another thing we'll look at very quickly before we sort of continue to this, to the next stage, is the if statement. So for this we use if. then in brackets, now inside these round brackets is the condition that's being evaluated. Now personally, I like to put the next step on a new line, but you can have it continuing. You can write all of the PHP pretty much on one line. That's fine because you separate statements with semicolons. So we have if the condition which is tested to see if it evaluates to being true, then an open curly brace and close curly brace. So we're going if whatever inside these round brackets is true, do whatever inside of these curly braces. Okay, we can also do else, another set of curly braces, and it goes, okay, so if whatever is inside these brackets evaluates to be true, do this, otherwise we do this. Okay, so if we did if true, you see we had the boolean true from earlier. Okay, now that would always go to this statement, right? If we did if false, then the code inside of here would never be parsed. Okay, it would only go to the directly to the else, right? And then simple operators normally used, so you could have if string equals another string, or you could have if an integer, so we could have if fruit equals apple. For example, if fruit was a number, or integer, we could say is fruit equal to 12. That's just saying is the value of fruit equal to that value. Alright, we can also use the not equal to by having an exclamation mark and an equal sign. So if fruit doesn't equal 12, do the code in here. Otherwise, we do the code in here. Common ones also include less than sign and equals to, which is if the value of fruit is less than or equal to the value of whatever's in the second part, the right hand side of the statement. Okay, we also have less than, greater than or equal to, and greater than, but they're all pretty self-explanatory. Now, in an if, you'll, in most cases, or at least in a large majority of them, want multiple conditions. So we go, okay, if condition A equals true, condition B equals true, then we'll do this, otherwise we may do something else. Now to do this, we can either use and or. Now alternatively to writing and or, you can also use two ampersands for and, or two pipes, which is a vertical line, for or. So we could say if fruit is greater than 12, or boolean equals true, so the value of boolean equals true. So if either of these conditions are true, or value is true, so if the value of fruit was greater than 12, then we'll do whatever's inside here, otherwise we do the other function. We could always also use or, and that achieves exactly the same thing. It's up to your preference whether you do this. Okay, and both conditions have to be true, so if fruit is greater than 12, okay, yep, and boolean is equal to true, then we do that. Make sure that you don't use one equal sign in one of the conditions, because that's setting the value of boolean to be equal to true, and then evaluating that. It's not testing if boolean is equal to true. Okay, it's a common mistake for beginners. So that's the basics of variables. We see you have the $sign, the name of the variable, the equal sign to see what it's equal to, and then the value in case of booleans, strings, booleans and integers. There's no need to have any extra characters around that. We end the definition statement with a semicolon. String values, we can either have a literal string, so the characters are ignored. It just puts out the characters. It doesn't look for any special meaning in the characters with a single quotation mark. And we can also have a string that is parsed, so to test it for variables and other things that evaluate into different things, like we had the backslash and n that evaluates into a new line character, because that's quite difficult for us to write out ourselves. Then we have apple and another var here. You see the variable is also taken into account. One final thing we'll look at is joining strings together. This is also referred to as concatenation, just a big word for joining strings together. So say if we use the echo function, which as I said earlier outputs things to the screen, we could do echo a string, space at the end of that, so we have the space on the end of it, dot, which joins them together, another string. Okay. Bear in mind that the plus also does this, but if you have, say, a string and a number, it will try to add them together, which will always equal 0, and therefore won't work as intended. So we join these two items here with the dot operator. Okay. Also, if you were defining strings, as we saw here with the fruit, so we could have fruit dot equals banana, and that adds banana onto the end of the fruit. You can also have plus equals, adds that value onto that variable, minus equals, takes that away from that variable. Two other quick things to look at. We could use integer plus plus, okay, adds 1 to it, integer minus minus. So don't forget the semicolon. Remember, single quotation mark, the string isn't parsed, speech marks, it is. Okay, the condition is being tested, and or, so both of them for and one of them for or. And that's the very, very basics of PHP.